I ignored symptoms for a lot of different reasons. I was in denial. I was afraid. I thought that it was temporary. It got to the point where I would have blood and I would be like, oh my gosh, nobody likes to see that. But then I would always say, let's see if it happens again. And this doctor, within 30 minutes, he had me on the table asking me questions, feeling around in my abdomen, and he could feel the mets that were on my liver. Right away, he looked at me, and again, I'll never forget, he just said, I don't like this at all. Very first thing was that I did have bowel issues, like more frequent, like loose bowels. I never had pain in my abdomen. I never went through like the cramping or the pain or anything like that, but it was over a period of time where I realized that I was having to go to the bathroom more frequently. Like it got to the point where it might have been like 4 or 5 times in a 24-hour period. You know, this would even be separated by months where it would just go away. And I would think, okay, well, that was some fluky thing, you know, but then it would happen again. It would just kind of disappear and I would forget about it. Because again, I didn't have problems with my appetite. I didn't have problems with pain. At that point, I wasn't losing weight. I was active. It wasn't really until the late summer of 2022 when there started to be more frequency of like traces of blood that I could see. And also just the very loose stool and very frequent, like I was probably getting up to like at least 5 times a day going to the bathroom. I'll never forget the day. I took my car in for an oil change early in the morning. And on the drive back from the oil change, I started feeling really weird and feverish. And over the course of a couple of days, fevers, chills. And that corresponded with weight loss. I've always been somebody who steps on a scale in the morning and just kind of keeps track of my weight. And I've always been kind of stable. But I want to say I probably lost about 15 to 20 pounds. I went to urgent care within a week after that fever chill thing. Did labs, but nothing showed up in the labs, you know, blood work. I didn't even have a primary care doctor because I had never really had issues. There was a doctor that, you know, was the primary for my dad and 2 of my brothers and my nephew. And one of my brothers started like banging on the door to try to get me in. He wasn't really taking new patients. I got a call and they said, hey, we have an opening. I think the appointment was scheduled for like 10 days later, but they let me come early, and that happened to be on Halloween. This doctor, I see him all the time because I go to appointments with my dad and I see him. But every time I see him, I'm like, you saved my life. He could feel mets that were on my liver. You know, I had noticed there was little lumpy stuff in my central abdomen, and I thought maybe it was my gallbladder or something. But right away, he looked at me, and again, I'll never forget, he just said, I don't like this at all. And immediately he called and set me up for a CT. I got back home from the CT, and by the time I had created an account and logged into my portal, boom, there was the CT report. And a lot of terminology that I was not yet familiar with, but it was very clear. Thickening of the sigmoid colon and numerous metastatic tumors on the liver. I wasn't very educated back then, but I knew enough to know that, oh, I've got stage 4 cancer. And, you know, immediately there was referral to oncology. So I'm very happy that, you know, it took such a long time for me to get to that point. But when I was diagnosed, boom, 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 boom. I had a biopsy, I had a port placed, and I was in the chemo chair within like 2 weeks. Only a month later, somehow I developed an infection. Never knew where that came from, whether it was introduced through the port or whether it was something in the gut. I was on the standard of care, you know, Folfox, Panitumumab, you know, 5-FU, which is fluorouracil, and the steroids and all that. It was just the basic treatment that everybody pretty much gets on. And I had 2 cycles of that before the endocarditis. and then the bowel obstruction that got to my mitral valve and started chewing up my mitral valve. So we had to pause treatment after 2 cycles because I had to get on a super high-powered antibiotic. I was in the hospital for 6 or 7 days trying to get this blood infection under control. Just finished all that antibiotic for the endocarditis when all of a sudden it went the opposite way with my digestion. All of a sudden I was constipated and ended up with a very life-threatening bowel obstruction. Because I was so fresh off of the endocarditis because of the blood infection, that I was being told that there's no way they're going to operate on me because my heart is weak.
But Ken's family wasn't going to take that for an answer. Thankfully, they were able to get Ken into the Mayo Clinic, a cancer institution in Rochester, Minnesota.
I had a total colectomy. When they took me into surgery that snowy night in Mayo, it was like 11 p.m. that they took me into surgery. But they told me, we're going to try to resect, but we may have to take it all. And when I woke up, I was told, we took the whole thing. Way back in the very beginning, I was told I wasn't a candidate for surgery. And then all of a sudden I'm having a total colectomy and I'm told that I'm, in line to do a resection of my liver. Fortunately, I've always been one who has responded well to treatment. So even though I'd only had about 3 cycles of chemo, the mets in my liver had already shrunk way down. So that first 6 months was terrible. Looking back, it's like, how did I get through that? And my weight was down to 118 pounds. I was finally healthy enough to where they could deal with my mitral valve, which was shredded from the endocarditis. So early February of 24, I had open heart surgery to replace my mitral valve. And it was successful. I was back on, the main thing has been the Panitumumab. It's not an immunotherapy. It's a targeted therapy. It's a monoclonal antibody. And that I have responded super well to that. I always say that there's no cookie cutter. Everybody responds differently to chemo. People have different side effects. I have never had nausea, vomiting, but I've had skin issues. My fingertips split. I had fissures, like splits, like canyons in my fingertips. At one point, all 10 of my fingers. I used every cream and lotion known to mankind. I used these little finger cots. But still, in life, you have to wash. I have to deal with my stoma bag. You put your hands in the sink, I have always had to pause my treatment after 5 or 6 cycles because of these pretty severe skin reactions. There's been a very quick reduction and shrinkage of mets. I've only had little spots, like 1 and 2 centimeter spots. As a stage 4 guy, I am now more than 3 years. It's like 3 years and 3 months now. And I'm not free and clear. I don't have a clean slate, but we are very on top of my disease. And I realize things can change. I'm doing well. Again, I'm not cancer free. I'm not even really NED, but it's very minimal, manageable disease. Whack-a-mole, as they say. Cancer becomes like a chronic thing where you just have to watch it. Surveillance, maintenance, chemotherapy, the occasional ablation. Hope is an interesting thing because, again, one of my favorite things to talk about is attitude. And I have always tried to be a realist and not, toxic positivity and, rainbows and unicorns and stuff like that. I'm not that kind of a person. But yet I am someone who tries to look, I want to be realistic, and being realistic involves being honest about the odds and the challenges and the difficulties, but then also having that hope. I've become involved with a men's cancer group called Man Up to Cancer. I have developed friendships with some guys. People die every week, and that's really hard. But you know what? there's also guys with my same diagnosis who are like 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 years down the road. So that gives me hope. I had always been the member of the family who was off, at the ends of the earth, and I would show up once a year or twice a year, and that has changed. So it's one of those things where I try to, count my blessings, where the last 6 years I've been able to be with my aging parents who are doing well, but still they have all the issues of people who are getting into their 80s. When I have had a procedure or a surgery or I'm in treatment, they want to take care of me. I don't want to be a burden to them, but at the same time, I want to give them the joy of nursing me and bringing me stuff if I need it, And again, on the other side of that is I do a lot of their grocery shopping, and, there's just things around the house, in the yard, snow, whatever. I try to be there for them and help them. There's days when I feel low and down and I don't have energy and I don't want to show up. There's days I just want to hide. I just don't want to show up. But there's people, in my life, whether they're friends or family, that I need to show up for. And I've learned that it makes me feel better if I'm showing up for other people. Knowing that this life on this planet, whether it lasts 5 more minutes or 20 more years, it's going to come to an end anyway. And there's something beyond that I'm looking forward to. So